so much, all of you, for being here and for having me. I'm actually going to cheat and not at all talk about myself. I think I have maybe time, but correct me if I'm wrong, for 3 short stories about other people, because my passion is learning, and the place that I see the need for all of the passion, all of the drive, all of the interest and enthusiasm to bring these skill sets that we bring to the table is through learning to communicate across boundaries. So it's very much, David, what you were saying about, okay, data-driven programming. Well, there's a woman, Anna Botelho, who unfortunately is not here. Fortunately, she gave birth very safely and comfortably to her 2nd child yesterday. Would not mind, I think, me sharing that. But she was a speaker at Design for Dance this last year. And Design for Dance was founded at Stanford. We can get you more information if you'd like to know more. But Anna, starting as an outside contractor, starting as a performing artist, as a dance teacher, went to Google, was teaching classes within Google, and now Google has 7 industrial-sized, beautiful dance studios on their Mountain View campus as a result of her hustle, as a result of her love of dance, but specifically she was able to prove to Google the value that dance brought. So she brought in Bhangra teachers because there was this audience of women who wanted to sweat and wanted community, maybe who came from an Indian background, who wanted to take Bhangra. They didn't want to take ballet, right? And they didn't want to take blues dance and Argentine tango. But the women needed a certain number of men to be in the class, right? And so Anna went out and she found those men, was very much promoting what she found her people were asking for. So there's a lot here. There's a video online of the talk that Anna gave at Google, so if you want more information about that specific, you can email me. Just feel free to get out my email and I'll send you that later. Google, if you search dance program at Google, that video will come up.
What about Facebook, your page?
I can also post it on Wizmo, absolutely. But by working from without the organization and asking people at the organization what they needed, she was able to prove to Google that the people who were coming to the dance program weren't otherwise in their fitness program. And Google knows it's easy to persuade, like, hey, look, these people are getting fit. They weren't getting fit before. You know that fit employees make happy employees, make successful companies. So let's build an environment where these dancers can actually go. That's one story. The second is a fellow, well, raise your hand if you've seen Minority Report, the movie. Yeah, so a minority of people, but there's this scene where Tom Cruise has these sort of form-fitting gloves and is swiping across sort of a digital space that is a futuristic computer. And I had never thought of it before until speaking to a fellow yesterday named Sydney Skybetter. You can Google Sydney Skybetter. He's recently left Harvard, is now teaching at Brown. He's a professional dancer, has performed on a lot of national stages. And he's also a consultant with arts organizations to look at what he calls the legacy code within those arts organizations and try to help them be less slow-moving. In other words, help nonprofit arts organizations keep up with the current day. And the reason Minority Report is interesting is he taught at Harvard this course looking at everything from stages in the 1830s when the proscenium stage, what we think of as like a stage today, was first developed, all the way through to Minority Report, which came out in the early 2000s. And how technology and dance have integrated and become more, have developed over decades, over generations. I've never thought of Minority Report as a part of our conversation, right? As a part of what is movement and how is it relevant in the workplace. But it's showing Tom Cruise doing these elaborate choreographed movements, interacting with a machine in a futuristic world that was the first time on screen that we showed cars without drivers. Oh, look, right? We're catching up. What was, as Sydney told me yesterday, what was science fiction 20 years ago is nonfiction today. The people who were doing the choreographed movement in that video, right? We're looking at Facebook now, and Sydney was talking about the organizations within Facebook who are looking at virtual reality. Mark Zuckerberg has recently been in the news saying virtual reality is the future of Facebook. What does that mean to us who think in terms of gesture, who start the conversation physically? These companies have this conversation going on, and we're having this conversation going on. And it's up to us to bridge that gap. So the last person I want to share is a woman named Dara Blumenthal. She reached out to me about the Design for Dance conference last February, and she did her dissertation, her PhD, on public toilet spaces.
Yeah.
So raise your hand if you've ever walked into a public toilet and felt uncomfortable. Maybe more than once, like twice.
Every time.
Dara started as a social psychologist and also practicing Alexander and Feldenkrais and a wide variety of somatic studies. And she started looking at what means the critical theory of movement. And then she said, okay, in movement, if you're uncomfortable, you don't breathe as well, right? If you are tense, right, you have biological processes, physiological processes that are counter to the norm. Right? We know this as movers, as people who love movement, we can feel when we're feeling less than ourselves. So Dara then took this and said, what are the spaces in the world where we are lacking this sense of self? Because we're repressing ourselves, because we're afraid, or we're guilty, or we're ashamed, or we're fearful. And she looked at public toilet spaces and saw that people are ashamed, are guilty, are fearful in these spaces. By the way, as a side note, Kaiser is implementing transgender bathrooms. And who are the people responsible for the conversations with Kaiser of transgender bathrooms, of how do we communicate about this, of what does it mean to be male or female within a patient environment, right? So that's a somewhat separate conversation, but related. Dara has now taken her research, and she's a management consultant. She's recently of a company named Undercurrent in New York and LA. And the reason that she was able to transition is because she's looking at these experiences of fear and taking them to the workplace and saying, where else in the world are people miserable most of the time, right? 90% of workers are unhappy at work. I think I'm fortunate, a lot of us are fortunate to not be sitting at a desk all day, every day, right? But we're trying to speak to an audience that is fearful, that is shy, that is ashamed, and they don't know what to do. So Dara is doing this research, going into companies and teaching leadership, teaching actually the organizations that teach leadership. So GE, for example, has a learning and leading branch, which is the program within GE that teaches the C-level execs, in other words. Undercurrent and Dara went in to train the Learning and Leadership Council on aspects of what are we afraid of? And how do we, not a huge dive, not asking them to be in this audience right now, but how do we take that little tiny step towards increased comfort in the workplace, right? At home, in the public restroom, wherever it is where people are shut down. Thank you, 2 minutes. How do we take those little baby steps towards increased ease? So Dara Blumenthal, Sydney Skybetter, Anna Botelho, there's so many people in the world having aspects of this conversation. And it's our, I was going to say responsibility, but I'll step back from that. It's our opportunity to start that conversation with them in a language that they understand. Because they're looking, right? The 21st century work is looking for change. There's new technologies, there's new styles. When I started in the workplace in 2006, say, being a freelancer was like unknown. And now being a freelancer is default. The kids that I dance ballet alongside are 13 to 15, and when they enter the workforce in 10 years, who knows what the workforce is going to look like? We get to don't have to decide, because the conversation will continue whether we're a part of it or not. But if we want to join in them, if we want to bring more compassion and more presence and more awareness, then we step forward and we say, this is the tool that I offer. And here's a language in which we can communicate it. So I'm having these conversations, and I think all of us can choose a discipline, right? So what is the tiny little step, as I asked David, that, okay, I can speak about presence. Well, how does someone at Google speak about presence, right? What is that one person who's already a dancer, who will open up when I start communicating with them? I have a podcast, Design for Dance is at Stanford. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not going to be here throughout the day, but you can send me an email, and I will post more on the website. What's that tiny little entry that we can make to start the conversation with the people who need it the most. Thank you.